Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. We are experiencing some unexpected turbulence.
The Gulfstream G650 private jet sat on the tarmac next to the commercial Boeing 737, both planes grounded by a single woman's command. Passengers pressed against windows, watching as airport security surrounded the aircraft, while Vivienne Blackwell, CEO of Blackwell Aviation Holdings, stood on the jet bridge in her crimson power suit, holding the commercial pilot's termination papers in one manicured hand and her phone displaying the airline's stock price plummeting in the other. 45 minutes earlier, a 24-year-old flight attendant named Ashley had physically blocked Vivienne from taking her paid business class seat, insisting that someone like her must have stolen the ticket. Now that same flight attendant was sobbing in the cockpit while learning that the black woman she'd humiliated owned not just the airline, but the very uniform on her back. If you believe that power isn't about revenge, but about revealing truth, and that dignity can't be stripped away by anyone who refuses to see it, then settle in for a story that will remind you why respect should never be conditional. Hit that subscribe button and join the Acts of Depth family, because what happens when assumption meets authority will leave you reconsidering every judgment you've ever made. Vivienne Blackwell had woken up that morning in her Manhattan penthouse, the city sprawling beneath floor-to-ceiling windows like a kingdom she'd conquered one boardroom at a time. At 40, she'd built an empire worth $3.7 billion, starting from a single regional airline her grandmother had left her, a company everyone said would fail within a year. That was 15 years ago. Now, Blackwell Aviation Holdings owns 6 airlines, including Meridian Airways, the very carrier she was about to board for what should have been a routine flight to London. She'd chosen to fly commercial that morning rather than taking her private jet, a deliberate decision tied to her philosophy of experiencing her companies from the customer's perspective. Once a quarter, she flew incognito on one of her airlines, observing service standards, testing systems, gathering the kind of intelligence that spreadsheets and reports could never capture. Her assistant had booked the ticket under V. Blackwell, her usual traveling alias, securing seat 2A in business class on the morning's first flight. The ride to JFK was smooth, her driver navigating the early morning traffic with practiced ease, while Vivienne reviewed acquisition papers for a small, sustainable aviation fuel company. She wore her favorite suit, crimson red, tailored to perfection by a designer in Milan who understood that power dressing for a black woman meant walking a line between commanding respect and threatening insecure egos. Her natural hair was styled in a sleek bun, her makeup minimal but flawless. Her grandmother's pearl earrings the only jewelry besides her Patek Philippe watch. Check-in was seamless. Security moved efficiently. The business class lounge was acceptably appointed, though she made a mental note about the wilting orchids at the reception desk. It wasn't until she approached the gate that the atmosphere shifted. The gate agents, 2 young women who looked barely out of college, exchanged glances as Vivienne handed over her boarding pass. One of them scrutinized it longer than necessary, even calling over a supervisor to verify that yes, V. Blackwell was indeed booked in business class. "Is there a problem?" Vivienne asked, her voice neutral but authoritative. "No, ma'am," the supervisor replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Just ensuring everything is in order. You know how it is with upgraded tickets." "This isn't an upgrade," Vivienne said calmly. "It's a purchased business class ticket." The supervisor handed back her boarding pass with visible reluctance, and Vivienne proceeded down the jet bridge, dismissing the interaction as another minor indignity in a lifetime of proving she belonged in spaces people assumed she didn't. She'd faced worse in boardrooms where men old enough to be her father questioned every decision until the numbers proved them wrong. She'd survived hostile takeovers, character assassinations in the financial press, and whisper campaigns about how a black woman couldn't possibly have built her empire without help. The plane's interior was standard for Meridian Airways: blue leather seats in business class, adequate legroom, acceptable amenities. Vivienne found her seat, 2A, and was placing her Hermes bag in the overhead compartment when she heard the voice that would transform a routine flight into a viral incident witnessed by millions. "Excuse me, you can't sit there." Ashley Morrison stood in the aisle, her flight attendant uniform crisp, her blonde ponytail perfectly positioned, Her 24-year-old face set in an expression of professional concern mixed with unmistakable suspicion. She was the kind of young woman who'd grown up in suburbs where diversity meant two different country clubs, who'd learned about the world through carefully curated social media feeds and parents who locked car doors in certain neighborhoods. "I'm sorry?" Vivienne turned, her eyebrow raised slightly. "That's a business class seat," Ashley said slowly, as if speaking to someone who didn't understand English. "Economy is further back, through the curtain." Vivienne held up her boarding pass. "This is my seat." 2A. Ashley took the boarding pass, examining it with the intensity of someone looking for forgery. "Where did you get this?" "I purchased it," Vivienne replied, her tone cooling by degrees. "3 weeks ago, through your airline's website." "Sometimes there are errors in the system," Ashley said, not returning the boarding pass. "Why don't you come with me and we'll sort this out?" "There's nothing to sort out," Vivienne said firmly. "That's my seat, that's my boarding pass, and I'd like to sit down so we can depart on time." Ashley's voice rose slightly, drawing attention from other passengers boarding. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to cooperate. These seats are for business class passengers only." "Which I am," Vivienne said, reaching for her boarding pass. Ashley pulled it back. "I'll need to verify this with the gate. This happens sometimes. People print fake boarding passes or steal them. It's a security issue." The accusation hung in the air like a poison cloud. Passengers in nearby seats were now openly staring, some with phones partially raised, sensing drama unfolding. Vivienne felt the familiar fire of rage burning in her chest, but she'd learned long ago that anger from a black woman would only confirm biases. Instead, she smiled, the kind of smile that had preceded the dismantling of several Fortune 500 careers. "What's your name?" Vivienne asked with that dangerous smile, pulling out her phone with deliberate slowness. "Ashley Morrison," the flight attendant replied, confidence wavering slightly at Vivienne's unexpected calm. "Senior flight attendant on this route." "Senior?" Vivienne almost laughed. "How long have you been with Meridian Airways, Ashley?" 2 years, Ashley said defensively, "and in that time, I've dealt with plenty of situations like this. People trying to sneak into business class, using stolen credit cards for tickets, you understand." "People like me?" Vivienne asked, her voice silk over steel. Ashley's cheeks flushed, but she doubled down. "I didn't say that. I'm just following protocol. Captain Richards, could you come here, please?" Captain Paul Richards emerged from the cockpit, a man in his 50s with the kind of weathered confidence that came from 30 years of flying. He looked between Ashley and Vivienne, immediately assessing the situation with the casual racism of someone who'd made these judgments so often they'd become instinct. "What seems to be the issue, Ashley?" "This passenger claims to have a business class ticket, but I have concerns about its validity," Ashley said, handing him Vivienne's boarding pass. Captain Richards examined it briefly, then looked at Vivienne with the practiced condescension of authority. "Ma'am, can you show me your ID and the credit card used to purchase this ticket?" "Is that standard protocol?" Vivienne asked. "Do you ask all business class passengers to prove their tickets are valid?" "When there are concerns, yes," the captain replied. "It's for the safety and comfort of all our passengers." Vivienne looked around the cabin. In 2B, a white man in his 30s sat scrolling through his phone, untouched by scrutiny. Across the aisle, a white woman was settling into her seat with a glass of pre-flight champagne already in hand. No one had questioned them. No one had demanded their papers. "I'll show you my ID," Vivienne said slowly, "if you also verify the tickets of every other business class passenger. For safety and comfort, of course." "Ma'am, you're being difficult," Captain Richards said, his patience theatrical. "Either show us proper documentation or we'll have to ask you to leave the aircraft." "On what grounds?" Vivienne asked, now recording the interaction on her phone. "Ma'am, put that away," Ashley said, reaching for the phone. "Don't touch me," Vivienne said sharply, pulling back. "And don't touch my property." That would be assault. The cabin was dead silent now, every passenger watching. A black man in economy had stood up, also recording. A young Latina woman in business class was live streaming on Instagram. The situation was spiraling beyond Ashley and Captain Richard's control, but their egos wouldn't let them back down. "Call security," Captain Richards told Ashley. "We have a disruptive passenger." "Disruptive?" Vivienne laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "I'm sitting in my assigned seat with a valid ticket. You're the ones causing a disruption." Within minutes, 2 airport security officers boarded the plane. They looked tired, like they dealt with too many entitled passengers that morning. But their demeanor changed when they saw who was being accused of disruption: a well-dressed black woman surrounded by angry white airline staff. "What's the situation?" the older officer asked carefully. "This passenger refuses to comply with crew instructions," Captain Richards said. "We need her removed from the aircraft." "What instructions?" Vivienne asked the officers directly. "The instruction to prove I can afford a ticket I already bought? The instruction to move to economy when I paid for business? Or the instruction to stop recording discrimination?" The officers exchanged glances. This was above their pay grade, and they knew it. The younger one noticed the multiple phones recording from various angles and made a calculation about which side of viral history he wanted to be on. "Ma'am, do you have your boarding pass and ID?" Vivienne handed both over. The officer scanned them with his device, which immediately confirmed the ticket's validity. "Her ticket is legitimate," he told Captain Richards. "She has every right to be in that seat." "I still have concerns," Captain Richards insisted. "As pilot in command, I have final say over who flies on my aircraft." "Your aircraft?" Vivienne said quietly, and something in her tone made everyone pause. She pulled out her phone again, this time making a call. "Marcus? Yes, I need you to ground Meridian Airways Flight 447 immediately. Captain Paul Richards is refusing to fly." "Yes, that's correct. And contact the board. We're having an emergency meeting in 1 hour." "Who are you calling?" Ashley demanded, panic creeping into her voice. Vivienne ignored her, continuing her conversation. "Also, pull the employment files for Captain Paul Richards and Senior Flight Attendant Ashley Morrison. Yes, immediate suspension pending investigation." "Thank you, Marcus." "You can't do that," Captain Richards scoffed. "Who do you think you are?" Vivienne stood slowly, her full height commanding the cramped space. "I'm Vivienne Blackwell. I own this airline. I own this plane. And as of 40 seconds ago, neither of you work for me anymore." The color drained from both Ashley and Captain Richards' faces simultaneously. Ashley's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The captain's confident stance crumbled as he pulled out his own phone, frantically searching for Vivienne Blackwell, CEO of Blackwell Aviation Holdings. The image that popped up, Vivienne on the cover of Forbes, under the headline, "The Billion-Dollar Disruptor," matched the woman standing before him perfectly. "Oh my God," Ashley whispered, her legs suddenly unsteady. "Sit down," Vivienne told her, not unkindly, "before you fall down." The silence in the cabin was absolute, broken only by the hum of the air circulation system and Ashley's hyperventilating breaths. Every passenger sat frozen, witnesses to a moment of corporate reckoning that would be replayed millions of times across social media within hours. Captain Richards stood paralyzed in the aisle, his tablet refreshing repeatedly as he watched his company email account deactivate in real time. "This has to be a mistake," he said, his voice cracking. "You can't just—" "I can, and I did," Vivienne interrupted, her composure unwavering. "Meridian Airways has a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, a policy you signed acknowledgement of 6 months ago during mandatory training. A training, I should note, that cost the company $3 million to implement specifically because of incidents like this." She turned to address the cabin, her voice carrying the authority of someone used to commanding boardrooms. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption. This flight will be delayed while we bring in a new crew. Anyone who wishes to disembark and take a later flight will be fully refunded and compensated with a $1,000 travel voucher. For those who choose to wait, we'll be serving complimentary premium meals and drinks in the terminal lounge." A few passengers began gathering their belongings, but most remained seated, phones out, unwilling to miss the conclusion of this drama. The young Latina woman who'd been live streaming called out, "Ms. Blackwell, I'm a business journalist with Bloomberg. Can you comment on what just happened?" Vivienne turned to her, recognizing the opportunity to control the narrative. What happened is what happens to Black passengers every day on airlines across this country. The only difference is that today, it happened to someone with the power to do something about it immediately. "But firing them on the spot," another passenger asked, "isn't that harsh?" "Harsh," Vivienne's eyebrow rose. "This crew was prepared to have me arrested for the crime of purchasing a business class ticket while Black. They questioned my right to exist in a space I not only paid for, but literally own. That's not harsh. That's accountability." Ashley had started crying, mascara running in dark streams down her cheeks. "Ms. Blackwell, please. I didn't mean, I wasn't trying to be." "Racist?" Vivienne supplied. "No, you probably weren't trying to be. That's the problem. It came so naturally to you that you didn't even recognize it. Tell me, Ashley, how many white passengers have you questioned about their business class tickets?" Ashley's silence was answer enough. "I have a family," Captain Richards interjected desperately. "A mortgage. Kids in college. You're destroying my life over a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Vivienne's voice sharpened. "You were ready to have me arrested. You called security. You attempted to violate my civil rights and humiliate me in front of a plane full of people. And now you want mercy? Where was your concern for my dignity when you were treating me like a criminal?" Her phone rang. Marcus, her chief operations officer. She put it on speaker. "Vivienne, we've grounded the flight as requested. The board has assembled a video conference. Also, CNN is calling for a statement, and our stock is up 3% since the story broke on social media." "Up?" Captain Richards said, bewildered. "The market loves decisive leadership," Vivienne explained, "and consumers, particularly younger ones, reward companies that take a stand against discrimination. Your racism isn't just morally bankrupt, it's bad for business." She turned back to her phone. "Marcus, have HR process the terminations immediately. Full investigation to follow, but I want it clear that Meridian Airways does not tolerate discrimination in any form. Also, implement immediate retraining for all flight crews, focusing on unconscious bias and customer dignity." "Understood. What about the passengers?" "Full refunds for everyone on this flight, regardless of whether they stay or go. And Marcus, I want Ashley Morrison and Paul Richards' final paychecks to include a note about the free lesson they've received today in treating all customers with respect." As security escorted Ashley and Captain Richards off the plane, both now former employees, Vivienne noticed the Black man in economy who'd been recording earlier. She walked back to him, extending her hand. "Thank you for documenting this. Too often, these stories aren't believed without evidence." "My daughter flies for work," he said, shaking her hand with visible emotion. "She's faced this kind of thing multiple times. Seeing someone fight back, someone with power, it means everything." Vivienne raised her voice so the cabin could hear. "Everyone in economy who wants to move to business class for this flight, you're welcome to. My treat. Let's see how it feels when the seats are filled based on kindness rather than prejudice." A cheer went up from economy as passengers began moving forward, including a young Black mother with 2 children, an elderly Latino couple, and several others who'd likely faced their own versions of Ashley and Captain Richards throughout their lives. The remaining business class passengers, those who hadn't fled in discomfort, shifted to make room, some looking ashamed, others inspired. Vivienne returned to her original seat, 2A, and finally sat down. The young journalist from Bloomberg leaned over. "Ms. Blackwell, what made you decide to fly commercial instead of private today?" "My grandmother," Vivienne replied, touching her pearl earrings. "She cleaned planes for 30 years. Worked for the very airline that became the foundation of my empire. She used to tell me about watching wealthy passengers in first class, how they looked through her like she was invisible. She made me promise that if I ever got power, I'd remember what it felt like to be unseen, dismissed, judged unworthy." She paused, looking out the window at her private jet on the adjacent tarmac. "I fly commercial quarterly to remember, to experience what my customers experience. to ensure my employees treat every passenger with dignity. Ashley and Captain Richards failed that test catastrophically. While the plane waited for its new crew, Vivienne walked through the aircraft, personally apologizing to each passenger for the delay. In economy, now largely empty, as people took her offer to move forward, she found an elderly black woman sitting alone, knitting with practiced efficiency. The woman looked up as Vivienne approached, her eyes sharp with recognition. "You're Sarah Washington," Vivienne said, her voice soft with surprise. "You worked with my grandmother at Eastern Airways." Sarah's face creased into a knowing smile. "Little Vivi Blackwell, I should have known you'd grow up to own the whole damn thing. Your grandmother always said you were destined for greatness." Vivienne sat down beside her, the CEO facade melting away. "Mrs. Washington, what are you doing in economy?" "Let me upgrade you." "Child, I've been flying economy for 70 years. I'm comfortable here. But what you did today?" Sarah reached out and took Vivienne's hand. "Your grandmother would be so proud. We scrubbed those planes until our hands bled, always wondering if things would ever change. You just changed them." "One flight doesn't change a system," Vivienne said quietly. "No," Sarah agreed, "but it's a start. And that young woman, Ashley, she'll remember this for the rest of her life. Maybe next time she sees a black woman in first class, she'll think before she speaks." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the new crew, led by Captain Janet Russo, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and silver streaking through her dark hair. She approached Vivienne directly. "Ms. Blackwell, I'm honored to fly you today. I want you to know that what happened earlier doesn't represent the values of most Meridian employees. We're horrified." "I know," Vivienne replied, "but being horrified isn't enough anymore. We need systemic change." As passengers resettled and the new crew prepared for departure, Vivienne made another call. "Legal, I need you to draft a new company policy. Any employee who discriminates against a passenger based on race, religion, gender, or any protected class will face immediate termination. No warnings, no second chances. Call it the Vivienne Blackwell Protocol." The Bloomberg journalist was typing furiously on her laptop. "Ms. Blackwell, can I quote you on that?" "Quote this," Vivienne said clearly. "Meridian Airways is implementing the strongest anti-discrimination policy in the aviation industry. We're also creating a $100 million fund to provide free business class upgrades to passengers who face discrimination on any airline. Documentation required, but we'll err on the side of believing victims." "$100 million?" someone gasped. "The cost of my grandmother's dignity," Vivienne replied. "Cheap at twice the price." Her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. "Ashley Morrison is in the terminal, refusing to leave. She says she needs to speak with you." Vivienne sighed. Part of her wanted to ignore it, to let Ashley face the consequences without the comfort of closure. But her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. "Power without mercy is just tyranny with better clothes." "I'll be right back," she told Captain Russo. She found Ashley in the gate area, still in her uniform, but with her wings removed, sitting on a bench with her belongings in a cardboard box. Her face was blotchy from crying, her perfect ponytail now disheveled. She stood when she saw Vivienne approaching. "Ms. Blackwell, I—" "Sit," Vivienne said, taking a seat beside her. "Say what you need to say." Ashley's words came in a rush. "I'm from Minnesota, a small town where everyone looked like me. I came to New York for adventure, to see the world, but I brought my small world with me. When I saw you this morning dressed so beautifully, so confident, something in me felt threatened, like you were in the wrong place, like you were taking something that belonged to someone else." "Someone who looked like you," Vivienne said flatly. "Yes," Ashley admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I've been thinking about it for the last hour. Really thinking. Every black passenger I've given extra scrutiny, every Latino family I've watched more carefully, every hijabi woman I've made uncomfortable with my security concerns. I never thought I was racist. I thought I was just being careful." "Careful of what?" Vivienne asked. "I don't know," Ashley said miserably. "That's the horrible truth. I don't know what I was afraid of. Maybe just difference itself. Vivienne studied the young woman, really looked at her for the first time. 24 years old, younger than Vivienne had been when she'd taken over her first airline. Young enough to learn, to change, to become better. I'm not going to rehire you, Vivienne said clearly. That decision stands. You humiliated me, and more importantly, you revealed that you've likely humiliated countless others who couldn't fight back. But I will give you this, a letter of recommendation for any job outside the aviation industry, conditional on you completing a year of volunteering with an anti-discrimination organization. Ashley looked up, tears fresh in her eyes. Why would you do that? Because someone has to break the cycle, Vivienne replied. Destroying you completely won't undo what you did to me or to others. But maybe, just maybe, you'll use this experience to become someone who fights against prejudice instead of perpetuating it. What about Captain Richards? Ashley asked. Captain Richards has 30 years of experience and multiple prior complaints that were mysteriously dismissed, Vivienne said. He knew exactly what he was doing. You might have been ignorant. He was malicious. There's a difference. She stood to leave, then turned back. Ashley, you asked who I thought I was. I'll tell you. I'm the granddaughter of a woman who cleaned planes while dreaming her children would one day fly in them. I'm the daughter of parents who faced discrimination with dignity while building generational wealth one sacrifice at a time. I'm a Black woman who turned systematic exclusion into systematic success. But most importantly, I'm proof that the very people you dismiss might be the ones signing your paychecks. The flight to London, when it finally departed 2 hours late, was unlike any in Meridian Airways history. The cabin had become a microcosm of what air travel could be when humanity trumped hierarchy. The elderly Latino couple from economy sat in business class practicing their English with the Harvard professor seated nearby. The young Black mother's children were being entertained by a white businessman who turned out to be a grandfather missing his own grandkids. Sarah Washington had finally accepted an upgrade and was teaching the Bloomberg journalist how to knit while sharing stories about the civil rights era. Vivienne sat in 2A, finally able to review her acquisition papers, but she found herself distracted by the transformation around her. This wasn't just about seats on a plane, it was about who got to take up space in the world, who was deemed worthy of comfort, of respect, of basic human dignity. Halfway through the flight, Captain Russo made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Today's flight has been unusual, to say the least. We've witnessed something ugly, but also something beautiful. The power of standing up for what's right. Ms. Blackwell has asked me to inform you that every passenger on this flight will receive lifetime gold status with Meridian Airways, regardless of which class you originally booked. The cabin erupted in applause. Gold status meant automatic upgrades, lounge access, priority boarding, privileges usually reserved for those who flew hundreds of thousands of miles a year. Vivienne was literally rewriting the rules of who got to belong in the premium spaces. The Bloomberg journalist, whose name was Maria, had been filing stories throughout the flight. Ms. Blackwell, I've been covering aviation for 10 years. This is unprecedented. The financial implications alone. Money is just a tool, Vivienne interrupted. My grandmother understood that. She saved every penny not to hoard wealth, but to buy opportunity. First for her children, then for me. Now I'm using that accumulated opportunity to buy something else. Justice. Your stock is up 7% now, Maria noted, checking her phone. The market loves this story. The market loves authenticity, Vivienne corrected. For too long, corporations have issued empty statements about diversity while maintaining systems that exclude. Today, we showed that real change is possible, even if it means firing your own employees mid-flight. As they crossed the Atlantic, Vivienne received a video call from her board of directors. Several looked concerned, others intrigued. Board Chairman Harrison Pike, a 70-year-old white man who'd initially opposed Vivienne's appointment as CEO, spoke first. Vivienne, while we appreciate your stance on discrimination, the abrupt termination of employees without due process opens us to lawsuits. Let them sue, Vivienne replied calmly. I have video evidence of discrimination, witness testimonies, and a clear violation of company policy. But more importantly, Harrison, I have something Captain Richards and Ashley Morrison don't: the moral high ground and public support. The union is raising concerns, another board member interjected. The union's concerns should have been raised when their members were discriminating against passengers, Vivienne shot back. Where was the union when black and brown passengers were being profiled? When Muslim passengers were being removed from flights for speaking Arabic? When disabled passengers were being humiliated? The union protected the perpetrators, not the victims. That ends today. Harrison sighed. What do you propose? A complete overhaul of our training program, mandatory monthly bias testing for all customer-facing employees, body cameras for all gate agents and flight attendants with footage reviewed randomly, and a passenger advocate on every flight, someone whose sole job is to ensure every passenger is treated with dignity. That will cost millions, someone protested. Discrimination has cost us more, Vivienne replied, not just in settlements and bad press, but in lost customers who chose other airlines after being humiliated on ours. We're going to be the first airline that guarantees dignified treatment for all passengers. That's our new brand promise. The board voted 7-3 to support her initiatives. Harrison, surprisingly, voted with her. After the call ended, he sent her a private message. Your grandmother would be proud. So am I. As the plane descended toward Heathrow, Vivienne walked through the cabin one more time. She stopped at each passenger, thanking them for their patience, listening to their stories. A young Asian woman shared how she'd been accused of trafficking when traveling with her adopted black daughter. An elderly Sikh man described being repeatedly randomly selected for additional screening. A transgender person explained the humiliation of being questioned about their ID not matching their appearance. Each story was a reminder that what had happened to Vivienne was part of a larger pattern, a system designed to make certain people feel unwelcome in spaces deemed too good for them. But today, on this flight, that system had been challenged and found wanting. The landing at Heathrow was smooth, but the real turbulence was just beginning. The story had gone viral globally. Number sign Flying While Black was trending worldwide. News crews were waiting at the gate. Vivienne's phone had hundreds of messages, interview requests, partnership proposals, and surprisingly, messages from other airline CEOs wanting to know how to implement similar policies. But the message that stopped her cold was from Paul Richards' daughter, Emma, a college student at Howard University. Ms. Blackwell, my father was wrong. I've been telling him for years about his prejudices, but he never listened. Maybe losing his job will finally make him understand. Thank you for doing what his family couldn't, holding him accountable. As Vivienne exited the plane, Sarah Washington stopped her. Your grandmother visited me before she passed, the elderly woman said quietly. She made me promise to watch over you if our paths ever crossed. But you don't need watching over. You've become the warrior she always knew you'd be. 3 months later, Meridian Airways published its first quarterly report since the incident. Customer satisfaction was up 40%. Bookings from previously underserved communities had increased by 200%. The airline had gone from 5th to 1st in diversity rankings. And Ashley Morrison, true to her word, was volunteering full-time at the Equal Justice Initiative, learning the history she'd never been taught. Captain Richards had sued for wrongful termination. The case was dismissed when 7 former passengers came forward with their own stories of discrimination under his command. He now worked as a crop duster in rural Texas, flying alone, unable to hurt anyone with his prejudices except himself. But it was the ripple effects that truly mattered. Other airlines began implementing similar policies. Congress held hearings on discrimination in air travel, with Vivienne as the star witness. Young black girls saw her on magazine covers and realized they too could own the planes they flew in, not just clean them. On the anniversary of the incident, Vivienne held a press conference at JFK, standing in front of a newly commissioned plane named Sarah's Dream, after her grandmother. A year ago, I was denied my seat because of the color of my skin. Today, Meridian Airways has the most diverse leadership team in aviation history. We've promoted more black and brown pilots than any other carrier. We've made dignity a guarantee, not a privilege. She paused, touching her grandmother's pearls. But we're not done. Justice isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a journey you commit to every day. Every flight, every passenger, every interaction is an opportunity to choose respect over prejudice, dignity over discrimination, courage over comfort. The Bloomberg journalist Maria, who'd become a friend, asked the final question. Ms. Blackwell, do you forgive Ashley Morrison and Paul Richards? Vivienne considered the question. Forgiveness isn't mine to give. It belongs to every passenger they humiliated before me, every person who couldn't fight back. But I do thank them. Their discrimination revealed a system that needed exposing. Their prejudice sparked a revolution. Sometimes the worst moments create the best movements. As she walked through the terminal, heading to her next flight, commercial of course, still testing, still watching, still fighting, Vivienne passed a young black girl in a pilot's uniform. The girl stopped, eyes wide with recognition. Miss Blackwell, I'm Captain Jackson. I'll be flying you today. I just wanted to say, my grandmother cleaned planes too. Seeing you own them gave me permission to fly them. Vivienne smiled, remembering her own grandmother's words. Baby, they can take your dignity only if you hand it to them. Hold it tight, pass it on, and watch it multiply. The Acts of Depth family knows that every story of justice begins with someone refusing to accept injustice. If Vivienne's courage reminded you that power isn't about stepping on others but lifting them up, share the story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and remember, you might be denied your seat today, but that doesn't mean you won't own the whole plane tomorrow. Your dignity is your superpower, and no one can take it without your permission.